The crisis between China and Japan sparked a debate in Japan about Chinese tourists. And the Chinese police were begging them not to go to Japan with strange dances.
Family, be cautious. Stop booking flights and hotels to Japan.
However, this propaganda by Xi was not a pacifist gesture. Its purpose was much darker and more crippling. The Chinese state banned its citizens from traveling to Japan in order to bring the Japanese economy to its knees. Xi Jinping's plan was flawless on paper. Japanese hotels would empty, merchants would bleed, and Tokyo would be forced to apologize to Beijing. At least, that's what he thought. So why are the Japanese mocking China's tourist boycott?
It's decreased a lot.
Does it affect sales?
It hasn't changed much. Japanese people are increasing now.
And the Japanese citizens and shopkeepers, the businesses, had already blown Xi's plan out of the water at that moment. So why were the Japanese so happy? Chinese tourists are flocking to tourist spots in Kyoto, Tokyo, and Hokkaido, but without following the rules, and by lying to the police.
Earlier, the police and authorities conducted a checkpoint at Arashiyama, a representative tourist spot in Kyoto.
And look, this is where the word ends, and the Japanese aunt's feelings instantly blew up Xi's plan.
It hasn't changed much. Japanese people are increasing now.
China's punishment turned into a reward for Japan. It all started with that one sentence. Japanese Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi set diplomatic courtesy aside and put the samurai spirit on the table. By crossing Beijing's red lines, she stated in November 2025 that if China tried to invade Taiwan, it would find Japanese forces standing in its way. This was the last straw for Beijing. Why? Because China was deathly afraid of Japan. They had never defeated them before. They had been invaded in the 1930s, and this fear triggered Xi's panic move. The 12 most critical air routes between China and Japan were suddenly frozen. A total of 490,000 airline tickets were cancelled. The Chinese state sent its citizens the message, "Don't go there, cut off their money, make them kneel." However, this plan backfired immediately. Because the Chinese wanted to be in Japan freely. There was anger and chaos at the airports.
Japan Airlines and China Eastern Airlines announced on the 15th that they will handle cancellations or changes for flights to and from Japan, such as Tokyo and Osaka, free of charge.
Chinese travel operators in Japan and China were in a difficult situation. The Chinese wanted to go to Japan freely, but they were afraid.
Japan is beautiful, so we want to have fun here. I don't know about any request to stop traveling freely.
They didn't know what to do about the ban. They were helpless. They even fled from Japanese TV as soon as they heard Xi Jinping's name. For the Chinese, the option of Japan seemed to be running out. Japan was the closest and most free escape route for them. Even the Chinese expect to be welcomed warmly anywhere in the world, for example in Sweden, if they escape from China. And this ban would turn into a nightmare for Xi Jinping, because people wanted to go to Japan, and they developed incredible methods to do so. For Xi, this is a disaster, because we are witnessing that his people will do anything to break this ban. And Xi was so desperate that he even started using the Chinese police in propaganda commercials.
Family, be cautious. Stop booking flights and hotels to Japan.
Let's go to Shanghai to see how seriously Beijing takes this ban. A Japanese anime event. Singer Maki Otsuki on stage. While singing the closing song of One Piece, Memories, she is suddenly dragged off the stage by officials. Her crime? Being Japanese. This was a panic move. Instead of firing missiles at Japan, Xi Jinping fired the tourism weapon, and the barrel of this weapon was turned back on himself. Because this move is expected to cause a loss of approximately $1 to $2 billion in China's tourism sector toward its own people. While China gifted Japan silence and peace, it condemned its own airlines to bankruptcy and its own citizens to unemployment. Beijing's calculation was that the Japanese economy is fragile. Tourism is their soft underbelly. If we pull these 490,000 people and the billions of yuan in their pockets, the Japanese tourism industry will collapse. We would create a 2 trillion yen hole, and they would become dependent on us to fill it. The strategy looked perfect on paper. China was practicing wallet diplomacy. In other words, they were saying, "We'll beat you with our money." But war plans always go out the window the moment you encounter the enemy. Beijing completely misread the Japanese people's psychology, their weariness, and their sociology. Chinese strategists assumed that the Japanese would prefer money over peace. But Japan had already earned the money. Now they were looking for something else. Take a look at the attitude of a Chinese tourist towards a hotel in Japan. The woman is trying to cancel her hotel reservation after the boycott decision. However, the Japanese hotel does not refund the fee for last-minute cancellations, as per its policy. The woman's reaction sums up China's general perspective. "This is Japan's fault. The Japanese side is being unfair. They are provoking us. Give me my money back because we are punishing you by not coming." This is where the irony begins. The punishing party is demanding compensation from the punished party. However, the Japanese hotelier's response summed up the stance of all of Japan: silence and enforcement of the rules. If you don't come, that's your choice, but the rules apply to everyone. Japan didn't even see this bluff. It stood its ground and didn't leave the table. It just kept refilling its tea. Professor Haruka Iwake's famous tweet actually expressed the feelings of millions of Japanese people. What did the professor say? "China is accidentally helping Japan. They are helping us solve the problem of over-tourism, and the Japanese people should feel very lucky. Thank you, Xi Jinping." This was not a diplomatic statement. It was a pure, unadulterated expression of relief. Looking at Japanese users' comments on social media, we see not a sense of panic, but a celebratory mood. Japan liked this situation so much that it decided to turn it into a permanent state policy. Kyoto City and the Japan Tourism Agency turned the crisis into an opportunity and accelerated the transition to a high-quality tourism model. New regulations reflected in the news show that Kyoto has put plans on the table to increase the accommodation tax for luxury hotels and tourists. China's boycott gave Japan the opportunity to carry out this selection on a silver platter. Xi Jinping actually became the biggest, most diligent, and most effective volunteer implementer of Japan's selective tourism policy. Japan didn't panic. Japan cleaned up. However, this situation is somewhat worrying for Japanese tourism operators. There is growing concern that the decline in Chinese tourists will severely impact the local tourism industry, especially in cities heavily dependent on visitors from China. First, while things are running smoothly in Japan, what's happening on the Chinese side? This is where the economic tragedy of this story begins. Because when the economic weapon was fired, the recoil hurt the shooter. China's aviation sector was already struggling after the pandemic. Which routes were the most profitable, efficient, and fastest cash flow generators for these companies? Namely, Air China, China Eastern, and China Southern. Short-haul international flights. That is, Japan and South Korea. Because the planes stay in the air less, fuel consumption is low, but ticket prices are high. Occupancy rates are always above 90%. These routes were the airlines' cash cows. So, what happens when a political order says, "Stop flights to Japan"? Are those planes pulled into hangars? No, planes burn money on the ground. Maintenance costs and leasing payments continue. Airlines were forced to take those planes and redirect them to China's domestic routes, to Chengdu, Shenzhen, Xi'an. But there was a problem. There were already enough planes on domestic routes. The market was suddenly flooded with excess supply. Ticket prices plummeted. Airlines started selling tickets below cost to avoid empty seats. The term "cheaper than cabbage" started circulating on Chinese social media. Air China and other giants reported billions of yuan in losses. Although passenger numbers appear to be increasing, yield, or revenue per seat, has plummeted. Company CEOs are probably tearing their hair out behind closed doors right now, because the Japan route was the crutch that kept them financially afloat. Xi Jinping, wanting to teach Japan a lesson, kicked that crutch away. Chinese airlines are now bleeding money because of their own government's policies. They have become victims of a self-imposed embargo. To call this a strategy, one must be completely ignorant of the meaning of the word. This is economic suicide in slow motion. But airline balance sheets are only the corporate side of the story. There is also a human side, and that side is much more painful. Let's take to the streets, to the point where nationalist rhetoric and "we're crushing Japan" propaganda don't fill stomachs. The theory of the leaders in Beijing was this: if our citizens don't go to Japan, they will spend that money within China. Domestic tourism will flourish, restaurants will be full, the economy will soar. This theory is called the substitution effect. But the economy is not a physics laboratory. The economy is built on trust. Why did people stop going to Japan? Was it just out of patriotism? No, it was out of fear and anxiety about the future. For years, international relations experts have been telling us about China's rise and its irresistible economic gravity. The theory was, China is such a huge market that no one can stand against it. If you don't attract its tourists, you go under. If you don't buy its goods, you go bankrupt. This incident marks the moment this strategy failed. The bubble has burst. Japan has proven to the world, we don't need China's money. In fact, breaking free from our dependence on China makes our economy healthier, more peaceful, and more stable. Looking at the data, Japan's tourism revenues continue to rise despite the decline in Chinese visitors. Because those vacant spots are being filled by American, Australian, European, and Southeast Asian tourists, and this tourist profile falls into the high-value traveler category. In other words, Japan has replaced its cheap and crowded customer portfolio with elite and respectful customers. This is not a crisis, it is an upgrade operation. This situation is also encouraging other countries in the region. The Philippines, Vietnam, Taiwan, they are all looking at Japan right now and seeing this. So we don't have to bow to China's blackmail. There are alternatives, and those alternatives are much more peaceful. Xi Jinping put his biggest card on the table, and Japan laughed it off. This is the moment when a superpower lost its deterrence capability. If your enemy thanks you when you use your biggest weapon, that weapon is no longer a threat, it's a joke. Ultimately, the winners and losers in this story are very clear. There was a threat of a 2 trillion yen loss, but Japan gained something that money cannot buy: social peace. The message from the Japanese people is echoing from Kyoto to Tokyo. Mr. Xi Jinping, we are grateful to you for this boycott you have imposed on Japan. Please do not back down. Please do not normalize relations. Let those planes stay grounded. The Japanese people are very happy with the silence on the buses, the cleanliness in the streets, and the reverence in the temples. You can keep this punishment going forever. Japan has no objection to this. So, what do you think about this? Please share your thoughts in the comments. To stay updated on new videos, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Thank you for watching.